time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Welcome to Bad Attitude Tuesday. 773-763-9278. Text me and call in if you dare. I was going to start with something else, but the news at the top of the hour talked about Max Miller, the congressman from Ohio who's running for re-election. And the reporter said, his wife has accused him of abuse. His wife accused him of not only abusing her, but breaking the collarbone of their 2-year-old. And, oh, by the way, she's not the only one. Here's the thing. Max Miller's girlfriend said he roughed her up, too. That's a pattern. When, you just report that, his ex-wife says he was bad. That could be, people start thinking, well, he said, she said. But if there is more than one woman who comes forward and says, yeah, he roughed me up as well, that, my friends, is what you call a pattern of behavior. And that is, generally speaking, how you identify somebody who has a problem, somebody who is a predator. His ex-father-in-law, Bertie Moreno, said that he thinks Max Miller needs psychological help and that this has been a nightmare for his family. And how does Max Miller respond to all this? Well, he's demanding an investigation. Yes, I want an investigation into the charges from my ex-wife. What about your girlfriend, Max? Is she going to be interviewed as well? Huh? Are we going to get a therapist to sit in a room with your small child to try to elicit whether or not daddy hit them? That's a father who cares about his kid, because that's got to happen. It just infuriates me. Anybody can charge anybody else with a crime. During divorce proceedings, during custody battles, sometimes the charges fly back and forth. But when your wife says something bad about you and your girlfriend says the same thing, because, people who are abusers, it's generally not a one-off. I mean, you don't just abuse one person and never have abused anybody before, never abuse anybody since. It is a problem with you. It is a problem that you cannot control yourself. So that is what you look for. You look for multiple accusations. You look for a pattern of behavior. And Max Miller seems to have it. Donald Trump, who, of course, is a convicted rapist, doesn't really want to weigh in on this, ducked it, said, well, when I've ever talked to him, he's been really nice. Well, you know what? Try being his wife, maybe. Maybe things would be different. He was really nice, and, it's kind of for the family to figure out. Yeah. But Republicans are convinced that if this guy doesn't get out of the race, and get out of the race soon, because there isn't, we're in August now, and there aren't that many days left to have a special election or get somebody to replace him. But it doesn't look like Max Miller is going to listen to other Republicans or his ex-father-in-law, certainly not his girlfriend or his wife. Nope. And so, yeah, people of Ohio, what's your tolerance for this? What's your tolerance for violence? Just asking. I'm asking for a friend. What's your tolerance for violence? Is that the guy you want to send back to Congress? Is that the guy that you can look to and say, yes, sir, that's my senator. Yes. Excellent. He reflects me and what I think is important. Okay. Moving on. Todd Blanche, you knew this was going to happen. Cornyn and Tillis say, well, we got to take him at his word, and he promised that, this slush fund was dead, and, instead of the IRS immunity being like forever, it's just going to be for in the past. Look at that. We got those two great concessions. There's only one problem with that. And that problem is that the legal experts who know a lot more about this than I do have said that it's kind of not real. That there's no reason to believe that 15 minutes after Todd Blanche is confirmed, that Donald Trump doesn't resurrect this stuff. And Tillis and Cornyn have to be smart enough to know that. So what was the whole we can't vote for him thing? What was that? It was clearly just performative when they've gotten promises that have no legal standing, my friends. No legal standing, can be redone pretty much anytime Donald Trump wants. Senator Durbin talked about Todd Blanche. Oh, yes, he did. He spoke at this morning's Senate Judiciary Committee hearing about Mr. Blanche. And he said Todd Blanche has no business serving as the nation's chief law enforcement officer. No business getting that role. Listen to Dick Durbin.
The man we are discussing this morning seeks to be the #1 law enforcement enforcer of the United States of America, the Attorney General of the United States, the highest-ranking law enforcement position. And what have we learned in the last few weeks when it comes to Todd Blanche? We have learned that simply his word is not enough for most of us, not even for some of my Republican friends. Even his word under oath is not credible enough. We have a demand by colleagues that I support, a demand that Mr. Blanche, when it comes to important promises to the American people, put it in writing. Put it in writing. And in fact, he did. Mr. Chairman, the political escapade of the last week has made it clearer than ever that Todd Blanche has no business serving as our nation's chief law enforcement officer. 2 Republican members of this committee said they would not vote for Mr. Blanche unless the J6 cop beater slush fund was permanently and irrevocably terminated. And of course, these 2 members, and I support their position, said to Mr. Blanche, you have to put it in writing if you're going to say those words. President Trump responded, as we might have guessed, as he always does, by doubling down on his position and personally attacking our colleagues. To state the obvious, Mr. Blanche's statement on the slush fund and the IRS immunity agreement are not signed by the parties to the settlement agreement and are therefore unenforceable. The parties could still sue to enforce the agreement, and the cop beaters fund can easily be revived with a new order from the Department of Justice 15 minutes after Mr. Blanche is confirmed as Attorney General. Indeed, the president himself has loudly telegraphed that's his plan. This is the exact issue that the 2 senators identified as a basis for their objection to his nomination, Blanche's nomination. To my Republican colleagues, you gave Mr. Blanche the benefit of the doubt when you supported his nomination to be Deputy Attorney General. 17 months later, there is no doubt where his loyalty will lie.
So, yeah, Dick Durbin can see it. Not only does this not prevent Todd Blanche or Donald Trump from reviving these ideas, but Donald Trump himself has said that's what's coming. That's what's coming, kids. This whole thing about agreeing to it is just a bump in the road. Just a bump in the road. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who is who is one of the most clear-eyed people right now in elected office, he posted his thoughts on the Blanche vote. Listen to Sheldon Whitehouse.
Today, I think, is a sad and embarrassing day for this committee. As it looks like on a party line vote, we are going to advance out of this committee probably the most discreditable person ever to seek the office of Attorney General of the United States. The reasons to vote against him number in the hundreds. Our Republican colleagues see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. I don't know where this committee goes after it stops being taken seriously, because all you have to be is on the right partisan side to get this committee to roll over and play dead.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse also not really a fan of what has happened. You know that I follow Liz Oyer, the former pardon attorney, who at first thought that things were going to be okay when Todd Blanche was named to the DOJ, because she thought, he's a lawyer, he's done this sort of thing before. And then he promptly fired her because she refused to restore the weapons rights to Mel Gibson. Yeah. Mel Gibson, if you're convicted of domestic abuse, you are by law not allowed to own a firearm again. But Mel Gibson thought, time has passed. I want my guns back. And her part of the Justice Department said no, and she was fired. And she has been following everything that is being done at the DOJ since then. Listen to Liz Oyer's take on this whole Todd Blanche thing.
Tom Tillis and John Cornyn announced today that they are going to vote to confirm Todd Blanche. They are claiming they got some important concessions from him on the settlement agreement with Donald Trump. But that is actual nonsense. The fact of the matter is they just caved. And now things are even worse than they were before Tillis and Cornyn got involved. Let me explain. I'm Liz Oyer, the former pardon attorney for the Department of Justice. Yesterday, Blanche signed a memo claiming that the $1.8 billion slush fund is dead. But here's the problem. The document he signed has no legal force. Blanche does not have the power to kill the fund without the consent of Donald Trump. This is a very basic matter of contract law. The fund was created by a legally binding settlement agreement between Trump and the Justice Department. A settlement agreement is a contract. One party cannot just walk away from a contract without the consent of the other party. And in fact, that is written right into this agreement, which states that it can only be modified with the written agreement of the parties. Trump has not agreed to modify it, nor will he, so it's not dead. In fact, on Friday, Trump's lawyers appealed a court decision finding that the fund is illegal, meaning that Trump is actively fighting to keep it alive. And lucky for him, there is now literally nothing that prevents Blanche from reviving the fund after he gets confirmed. Here's the other giant problem. Blanche's memo says nothing about the immunity part of the settlement, which gives Trump total immunity from all tax audits and other government investigations. This part of the deal is worth hundreds of millions of dollars to Trump. Last year, Trump made over $2 billion. The settlement effectively allows him to pocket that money without paying taxes. If he does not pay the taxes he owes, there is literally nothing the government can do about it. DOJ issued a press release, which Blanche did not sign, trying to minimize the importance of the immunity deal. It says it applies only retroactively, and that DOJ's interpretation is that it extends only to the parties to the agreement, meaning Trump, Don Jr., Eric, and the Trump Organization. So basically, it just confirms that Trump and his sons are getting a massive windfall at our expense. Tillis and Cornyn have now blessed this totally corrupt agreement by saying they are satisfied. And it's even worse than that. They are now thanking Blanche, even though he is the one who made this corrupt deal possible in the first place. So basically, this is just a really crushing disappointment.
I love the way she lays it all out in terms that a non-lawyer can understand. So I don't understand why Tillis and Cornyn even offered an objection in the first place, because they didn't get what they demanded. They got lip service. They got a document they can hide behind. It's not like they're running for re-election. Do they both really need the money badly enough that they can't tick off the Republican Party because they want to be lobbyists? I don't get it. I really don't get it. They're not stupid people. They know what they're doing. They know it is all performative. It means nothing. Oh, look, I made Todd Blanche sign his name to a piece of paper. Well, does that piece of paper really have the force of law? Will that piece of paper accomplish what you've demanded? Well, no, but he signed a piece of paper, and isn't that what we were asking for? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. In other news, today is the big Michigan primary. Everybody is taking a look at the Democratic race to be the nominee for the Senate seat. Oh, my goodness. We have a middle-of-the-roader, and we have a progressive. Ooh, this race must be indicative of the entire rest of the country and what everybody's going to do going forward. Do you really think that's true? I think the people of Michigan are either going to vote for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, the progressive, or somebody who's already a representative, Haley Stevens, who's described as a moderate. They both want to get the nod to be the Democratic candidate for the open Senate seat in Michigan. And everybody's looking at this like, whoa, well, Haley will be so much easier. She'll have an easier time defeating the Republican. Those progressives, in the general election, those progressives, you just can't count on them. That is not a position that Senator Bernie Sanders has. And as a matter of fact, Senator Sanders was recently explaining why he thought that Abdul El-Sayed was a great candidate. Forget about labels. He was on All In with Chris Hayes, Bernie Sanders was, and this is what he had to say about Abdul El-Sayed possibly or probably winning tonight.
There has been a trend to suggest that possibly Haley Stevens would be a stronger general election nominee and candidate against Mike Rogers, who's going to be the Republican candidate, than Abdul El-Sayed. And I'm curious, obviously you agree with Abdul El-Sayed on the merits, right? But I'm curious your response to the argument that there's a risk here on the electability front in a state that is very close and that Donald Trump carried against a pretty strong candidate in Mike Rogers.
All right, here's my response, and it's twofold. Number one, I believe that when you have a candidate like Abdul El-Sayed talking about the issues that are relevant to working class people, whether they're Democrats, independents, or Republicans, you will win over people who previously voted for Trump. Independents and Republicans in Michigan cannot afford health care. They know the current system is broken. They support concepts like universal health care and Medicare for all. Republicans, independents in Michigan do not believe we should give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1% and throw 15 million people off of health care. They think, in fact, that the billionaires should start paying their fair share of taxes. That is what Abdul believes in. Republicans, independents, Democrats understand that we have a campaign finance system that is absolutely corrupt. billionaires buy elections. Abdul tomorrow. And this is really quite incredible. If he wins, he is going to have to overcome a 9-to-1 spending ratio in terms of ads. They're spending 9 times more than he is because it's a corrupt campaign finance system. The billionaires want Haley Stevens to win. Second point, what Democratic establishment people look at the voter electorate as a fixed number. We don't. When Mamdani won in New York City, he had 100,000 volunteers out on the street. He expanded the voter universe, brought new people, young people primarily, working class people into the process. Right now, Abdul has thousands of volunteers working. So I think what you will see is any increased voter turnout, and many of the new people who are participating in the general election will be younger people who traditionally don't vote, working class people who have been disenchanted with the Democratic Party. That is how and why El Sayed will win the general election.
Well, you know, studies of the Democratic Party, analyses of why they have lost the working class voter is because study after study, they've lost touch. Working class people feel the Democrats have become the elites, that they don't care about working class values. And that is one thing I will have to say. I mean, I know there's an argument for voting for the safe candidate who feels more middle of the road. I get that. But Bernie may have a point. All the disenchanted voters that used to be regular, solid Democrats and drifted away, many of whom sadly started voting for Trump. Progressive ideas. And by the way, there's really not even that much difference between these two candidates running for the Democratic nod to replace Gary Peters in the Senate for Michigan. They have a lot of things in common. They really do. CNN was reporting, you know, who has support. And Mr. El Sayed has the support not only of Bernie Sanders, but also Elizabeth Warren and AOC. Haley has the support of, oh, God help her. She has the support of Chuck Schumer. Woo! Okay. She has the support of Chuck Schumer. The outgoing Senator Gary Peters has said that he supports her. So, Haley Stevens and Abdul El Sayed actually have a lot of issues and policies in common. I don't know. Do you want to vote for the candidate that AOC supports, or do you want to vote for the candidate Chuck Schumer supports? This is going to be interesting. We will, of course, hopefully, we will have the results tomorrow and be able to chat with you about this. I want to remind you that the phone lines and text lines are open, 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. We've gotten a number of texts so far. Oh boy, some of them, you know, it's not that I don't want to read your texts, but some of them are like long essays. I don't know if this texter is referring to Max Miller. Make up your mind. You were tied to Plattner all through his dirt. Now you're bothered with this guy. Graham Plattner explained away the charges that were brought with him early, that he had posted some terrible things, that he'd sometimes, you know, been a jerk. And he said, you know what? Don't judge me by the mistakes I made when I was younger. Then when one woman, I think, accused him of rape, one woman accused him of sexual assault, and he withdrew from the race. And everybody who had endorsed him withdrew their endorsements. Isn't that how it's supposed to work? Who are the Republicans who are withdrawing their endorsements of Max Miller? Name one. Name one. Plattner's no longer in the race because when the rest of it came forward, he was pressured to leave, and he did. Who's pressuring Max Miller to leave? We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with calls and texts right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We have lots of callers and some really interesting texts. This one came in. Hi, Joan. Is there even precedent for granting immunity for IRS issues? That is a very good question, and I don't know. Nothing comes to mind. I guess that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. Generally, the only reason you get immunity from the government is you're giving the government something in exchange, like offering a criminal immunity if they turn on the bigger criminals they've been working with. I have not heard of that. I will look into it. And then on Todd Blanche has no shame or moral compass, especially since he's an enabler of a poor excuse for a president. He is accountable for the Epstein class protection, especially since he gave Ghislaine Maxwell preferential treatment for her silence. Yes, I've talked about this before. Todd Blanche is all in on Donald Trump. All in. He left his law firm. He left a lucrative partnership. He moved his family to Florida to be Donald Trump's criminal lawyer. And then when Trump made it to the presidency, he was promised, he had his sights on head of the DOJ. You're going to get this. You're going to get this. And then he didn't. And he got the number 2 spot. And the people in the White House aides were like, just hang in there. Just hang in there. It'll happen. It'll happen. It'll happen. And apparently it has happened. And Senators Tillis and Cornyn have done us no favors by saying that they're going to kick his nomination out of the committee, that they've been satisfied. Yes, he signed a piece of paper that we wanted him to sign. We are satisfied. Really? Okay. Is that how it goes? So let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Park Ridge, where Steve is on the line. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Joan. Nice to talk to you. I don't think I want to ask you if you remember. I actually introduced myself to you in Oak Brook when you had held one of those union meetings about 4 or 5, 6 years ago.
Oh,
and
wow. You're going back. You're testing my memory.
I introduced my Facebook page at that time, Concerned Citizen.
Yes, I remember. I do actually remember.
Right. I'm that person. Well, I've been doing it now for 9 years, a little over 9 years, every day, in honor of my World War II father, who I was at his deathbed. And I said, I'm going to do something to honor your life well lived. And 8 days later, my daughter said, what are you going to do for Grandpa? I said, I don't know. How about Facebook? She said, great. And then I thought of a name, Concerned Citizen, because I've been a concerned citizen ever since you-know-who came down that escalator. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm actually, I was telling your screener, I'm actually calling, it's like you're my therapist. I listen to you a lot, and I listen to Tom Hartman. I've been on Hartman's show. I've been on Stephanie Miller's show. I've actually met both Stephanie and Tom Hartman. I'm not trying to names drop, but, these are progressive heroes of mine, and you're doing so wonderfully as you mature into this position, because I've been a listener of this station for back when I worked, and I've been retired for 16 years, so I think the station's 20 years old. I've been around for about almost that whole time. Now, I had 417,000 followers on June 28th when I got hacked, and that's where I'm looking for a little comfort from TLC, from someone like yourself, because it is so friggin' impossible to work with the Facebook AI bureaucracy to try to get reinstated in the things that I've
Yeah, it is really frustrating. I remember the artist, actor, poet Tony Fitzpatrick. Facebook used to, he described it as being in Facebook jail. His account would get locked up, and then he'd have to work and work and work, and then he would finally got it freed. He'd say, I'm out of Facebook jail. And then like 8 months later, he's like, I'm back in Facebook jail. Yeah, they don't make it easy. They really don't make it easy. Well, give me the name of the Facebook page again.
It's Concerned Space Citizen.
Well, hopefully
sure
a lot of the
some
people who are listening to us now, Steve, will look you up and give you a follow. And I do remember meeting you. Thanks for the call. I gotta keep moving, but thank you so much for calling in today. Let us go to our friend Jim, who's on the line from Chicago. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Joan. Tuesday, gruesome Tuesday. Anyway, in my estimation, the difference in the body politic today is the independent voter. They're becoming more numerous every day, and when they're polled, independent voters under 50 cannot stomach the genocide in Palestine and the apartheid of the Palestinian people. They believe that they should be free. They've been free for thousands of years, and they should remain free. That's a big thing. Up in Michigan and wherever else. But just when I think about the independent party, in fact, I'm almost at the point now where it's like an embryo of a third party. We've been under the two-party system since the dawn of the 19th century. Thomas Jefferson's party was the Republican Democratic Party. It was against Adams' party. They call themselves the Federalist Party. And that's been acrimony from the beginning, Joe. And from the very beginning, states against states and so on and so forth. That's been going on since the dawn of the 19th century. And now we're in a period where we know that money in politics is insane. The money that they're spending in politics is insane. When we have citizens in America who don't have health care, when we're spending billions of dollars to go to airports and throw people out of the country, I mean, we're in an insane situation, and the independents realize that. I don't think they want to hear the nonsense.
And a lot of the Republicans who don't have any faith in Trump, don't want to be Trump supporters, they are becoming independents by the handful. I mean, they are one of the largest groups that are increasing the numbers of independent voters, because like they've been a Republican their whole life. They don't want to be a Democrat, but they can't stand Trump and what's happening. So, okay, I'm an independent. Okay, I don't know though if they're enough of a group where they can actually run their own candidate and make it a viable candidate.
No, I mean, yeah, it's so far it's been an impossibility. I mean, we had that in the we had it several times. The probably guy that came close was Teddy Roosevelt with the Bull Moose Party, and then we had the guy with the dough and with the Bush and he gave it the old college try. So we know it's not but the point is, I can see it coming up. Because the way we're going about our politics now is absurd. It's absurd. Like as Bernie said, he said, my God, they're spending billions and billions of dollars. APEC is spending billions and billions of dollars in these campaigns. In the meantime, we've cut health care. We've got homeless people. We've got some real problems here in the United States. And I mean, I can't take another settler killing an innocent Palestinian. Ro-Khanna was there, and he was stopped by settlers with machine guns. Our machine guns, Joan. American-made machines. These are settlers. They kept them at bay for 90 minutes, and then the soldiers showed up, and they were on the side of the settlers. He thought he was going to get killed. He's just an American citizen going to get killed by the Israeli government. We were giving them $3 billion a year to get those guns. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is just
this
absurd.
war that Israel is conducting, and because they still are, has done huge damage to the support that Israel could always count on in this country. You know, it was almost blind support because we understood that they were, you know, surrounded by potential enemies and they were the little guy and they were trying to be a democracy. And but now the people see them a whole different way. And among younger voters now have a larger number of them look at Israel unfavorably than favorably. And that is a change.
Yeah, that's a change. And remember, Netanyahu is a war criminal. Trump's a war criminal. Putin's a war criminal. And the ICC, the International Court System, Rubio wants to take it down by brick. We don't want to investigate any murders on this planet because
you know, Rubio is particularly disappointing to me because, you know, Pete Hegseth's an idiot and a moron. J.D. Vance is just a schemer. But Marco Rubio served in government and had a decent reputation. But now I guess, you know, he's like Todd Blanche. Whatever it takes to stay in Trump's good graces, that's what Marco Rubio is going to say, what he's going to do.
Remember, they're all going to walk away with money, Joan. I mean, they're gambling on oil every day. Oh, the three oil companies are making billions, 14 billion, 20 billion. Exxon, every one of them is making billions. So they know they could dump their mone into those stocks.
Insider trading, baby.
Yeah, when they walk out of their room, they know where to put that 100, 200 grand. Yeah. Anyway, Joan, thanks a million, dear. Thank you.
Thank you for the call. We are going to take a break. We're going to get back to more calls right after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We are taking your calls and reading your texts. Let's go to the phone lines. Steve's on the line from the Gold Coast. Hello, Steve. How are you today?
Hello there, Joan. So I want to make a few points. One, it's important for people to understand that the democratic socialists in this country are not one thing in the same way Democrats are not one thing. Numerous other parties, Republicans aren't one thing, at least they didn't used to be. So, you know, when you gather a group of them in a room, you'll find that there are factions. So there are democratic socialists. Many of those are the people that we see represented in terms of the elections that we've had recently and the people who've been nominated, people like Bernie Sanders. These are people who offer up policies, you know, crazy policies such as more investment in terms of education, more affordable higher education, a universal single-payer health care system, things that many Americans support. You know, so that this isn't radical at all. Now, that's not to say that there aren't democratic socialists who are, quite frankly, you know, unhinged. I mean, there are people out there who think, you know, we should open up the doors of all prisons and do away with police. You know, I mean,
but that's why. That's why I think it's so important, not just to label somebody, but to sit down with somebody like El Sayed and say, okay, what is your position on this? What is your position on this? Because most of the people that I've seen in public life who say they are democratic socialists, they don't follow the whole laundry list of things that democratic socialists are supposed to believe. They pick and choose what makes sense to them, as they should.
Yeah, that's why we have, you know, when the Republicans run and when Democrats run, that's why we have debates and why we have a whole group of people, all of whom are in that same party, on a stage, and they are articulating what their views are and how those views differ from the next person up on that stage. Because just because you're a Democrat doesn't mean that you're all of one mind. That's why again, you know, it's necessary to understand what is the difference between those Democrats that are on that stage, and there are, again, different kinds of democratic socialists. And how do they differ from Democrats? So, again, but, you know, like I say, they suffer from a labeling problem. Unfortunately, anything in this country, because, you know, since the Cold War, anything that's got the word socialist in it, okay, that's it. You're in Maoist China. You're in Stalinist Russia. You know, you might as well be living in North Korea. Mm-hmm. That's what these people want. No, that's not what they want. Pretty much democratic socialism is social democracy, which is what defines Western Europe. So I'm sorry, but you can be very wealthy in Germany and in France and in England, and you can have a private yacht and private airplane, and you can be a billionaire. Then yes, it's not, you know, some sort of North Korean system, you know, whereby everybody's living in poverty except for the exalted leader and a few political heads. So yeah, I mean, like I say, we've come to a point, I think, in terms of this country and in terms of the Democratic Party, where we need a big tent. And make no mistake, I think democratic socialists have a place at the table. I don't think that they're going to win in most places in this country, and that's fine because, what works, in places like Illinois, is different than what may work somewhere such as Texas.
Exactly. The district has a flavor, and the candidate that best reflects that flavor is the candidate that should be on the ballot for your party. The big tent. We used to have a big tent that was moderates and conservatives. And now all of a sudden we have a big tent that's moderates and more progressives. And I don't understand why the moderates, who have always been in the middle, are panicking. Oh, they can't win. They're too radical. Well, you know what? People are so disgusted right now that I think they want different. They might give something a try that they might not otherwise have done, 10 years ago. Anyway, thank you, Steve, for the call. Clearly, you hit one of my buttons, too. Appreciate it. Let's go to Dave, who's on the line from Hoffman Estates. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Joan. Got to wondering there, like you mentioned, like with Plattner and that. Now, if this Max Miller was a Democrat, he'd have been gone by now. So.
Yep, absolutely. That's the difference. Instead, the Republicans are afraid to say a word against him, and he's taking the Trump path of doubling down. You think I'm an abuser? Prove it.
Yeah. Well, just like, we always say Democrats have had a circular firing squad where the Republicans circle the wagons, no matter how bad. And then let's not forget there's another one in the news, that Representative Chuck Edwards from North Carolina. The House Ethics Panel has recommends censuring this guy after harassment allegations. He's the one that keeps saying, nope, I'm going to stay in there. And you know who his predecessor was, too, right?
No.
Madison Cawthorn.
Oh, yeah.
And now he's going to be a carpetbagger. They showed last year he's going to try making another run for it again out of Florida. Moving to the state of...
Yes, I read about that. Oh, okay.
Keeping up the tradition and that. And how about this for chutzpah, however you want to say it? This morning I heard on the news that Trump criticized ExxonMobil and Chevron for making too much money off of the high fuel prices during the war. Wow.
Like he hasn't helped them every step of the way? Good God. Good God.
And then at that thing with this Blanchard Act, and then how he got through it, any one of these people who claim to be, the Republican-leaning, whatever, and they claim to be sympathizers for those Epstein survivors, they're both blue or you're just a bunch of hypocrites if you vote for any of these Republicans.
Yep.
Because in fact, that creep, he went and met with them, and it was just kind of like, well, I got to do this, meet them, and then they said he was condescending and all this kind of stuff that, he just wanted to say, like, legally accurate. I showed up, seen them, them women,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that, and I'll leave you on this one, Joan. Got to thinking how the stuff with progressives and the liberal. Think if Franklin Roosevelt would have died a little sooner, and we could have had Henry Wallace, who was the progressive, would have been probably in a whole lot better shape with medical and all of this kind of stuff by now.
It woulda, shoulda, coulda.
But it was our own people that ate them up. Senior Democrats are the ones that run them out. It wasn't the Republicans. Like I say, I seen the enemy and we is they. So anyway,
sometimes we are.
Yeah, let me get off so you got others. So thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dave. And let us stay with the phone line right now and go to our friend Paul, who is on the line in Seattle. Hey, Paul, how are you today?
Hey, John. I've dropped this down as a possible topic for when you meet next with Mark Jacobs and Jennifer Schulze, because I think this is a meme that's basically propagated by the news media. And it's the idea that, they're warned that, better not have somebody who's too liberal. Some are saying that, Abdul al-Said maybe too liberal. So we're always being warned to stay within the moderate territory. But the Republicans are never, I think so-and-so might be too extreme for the,
Exactly.
Never. I mean, this is why we get them.
Ken Paxton. Is anybody in the Republican Party saying, that guy, I don't know if he can be elected. He's so far to the right. Well, if they are saying it, they're not saying it out loud. I believe probably in private they might be saying it, but yeah. The Republicans, there's nobody that so far that's come out against Max Miller, who has been credibly charged with beating women up.
Yep, and Democrats have drummed out plenty of abusers. Graham Plattner, Eric Swalwell, Al Franken for acting like he was grabbing someone's boob in a gag photo. Lots of them. And can you think of one Republican drummed out for abuse? No. But here's the other thing, is that when has it ever been the case that we as Democrats agreed that, whoever it was that lost, it was because they were too liberal? No, we don't say that. But whenever Democrats lose, like Kamala Harris or Hillary Clinton, the other side says, they were too liberal. I mean, these are middle of the roaders. And then the news media runs with it and says, okay. So in other words, the Democrats keep saying, we have to get closer and closer to being milquetoast in the center. And the fact of the matter is, we have none of our progressives have ever lost. Our real progressives don't lose.
Yep. And, we always, we could always figure that it's not just a question of politics. There's more to it. I believe, and that's why there was somebody who texted in today, said, AOC for president. No, my sweet, much as I would love to see that, much as I would have loved to have seen President Kamala Harris or President Hillary Clinton, this country right now is not going to elect a woman president. And frankly, this is even worse for me to say. I don't think that there should be a woman in the VP slot. I also don't believe that Pete Buttigieg should run for president because I don't think we are in the headspace to elect a gay man to the presidency. We have swung conservative. I think we need, God help me, a straight white male, maybe two of them on our ticket.
Yep, I agree. And you know what? You can tell because Gretchen Whitmer endorsed Haley Stevens that she's planning on a bid for the presidency in 28.
She's toyed with it. She's toyed with it. But I'm hope and pray she is smart enough to see the writing on the wall. Do I think she'd make a good president? Yep. Hell yes. I think she would. I think AOC would. I think all of them would. But this country is not in a mind space. No. I remember when reporters went down to, I don't know where it was in the South, and they talked about, should we elect a woman for president? And it wasn't just the old white men who said no. It was their wives who said, I just don't think a woman should be president. I just don't think that's what a woman should do, So we have a lot of work to do in this country. I don't think I will see a gay or female president in my lifetime, but I hope, I pray that it'll happen at some point.
Yeah, we're not up to all of the other nations of the world who've had women leaders. You can just go through and name them, dozens of them, and we are just not there yet, including, Mexico has got a woman president
New
now.
Zealand, Iceland. Yeah. We had Margaret Thatcher. We had Angela Merkel in Germany, but no, not us. No.
Golda Meir.
Yep.
Yeah. Golda Meir was. We've had lots of them. And they were good. And yet we are not ready for that because we keep fighting on the same old memes. It's the misogyny and the racism is what we keep going to, and that's a meme that still flies. And so I do agree that we have to kind of guard against that. Gretchen Whitmer, the only thing I don't like about her now is that she doesn't want universal health care because her father was the former CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield, and boy, you ought to see Blue Cross Blue Shield rates in Michigan now. They're outrageous. So I'm not thrilled about that. She's not exactly a progressive. I do think she's because she endorsed Haley Stevens when she had no reason to, as she's going out. think she is planning on a bid for 2028.
Paul, we've got to get to the news. Thank you so much for the call. It's always enjoyable to chat with you. We are going to take a break for news, and we are going to come back and talk to some people after that.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am very happy to welcome to our show Julia Metro. She writes for Mother Jones. She writes about disability and public health. She also has her own website, and there are other publications, many of whom you have definitely heard of, like Business Insider, that she writes for as well. I don't know how I came across this, but there was a Mother Jones article that she wrote about California that caught my eye. But then I realized when I looked into it a little deeper, she's written a lot of things that we should know about that are important to us. Julia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's set California aside for a minute, which is what caught my eye, because I read The Great Inflammation Panic, your article about RFK Jr., and I thought it was awesome. And I also like the fact that you personalized it by starting off by telling your medical story and then expanding on where we are now. Would you mind sharing your story with the listeners?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. When I was 18 years old, I developed an autoimmune disorder called vasculitis. I was undiagnosed for over a year, which is a common experience for many of us autoimmune disorder havers. I've dealt with, for it to be very medical, like elevated C-reactive protein and stuff, which definitely shows I have elevated inflammation markers. And a bit into after I was diagnosed, which this article touches on, my dad really started pushing this diet on me. It's this diet by Stephen Gundry. It's the lectine-free diet. And it's really one example of, one could argue, pseudoscience-based diets that claim that this can control your inflammation, this can control your health, that doesn't have really much evidence to support it at all. And this article goes through how wellness grifters or alleged wellness grifters and people involved in Make America Healthy Again movement have really used this concept of inflammation to spread fear. And it's like true, some of us do have inflammatory disorders, but at the same time, we shouldn't be 100% panicked about this thing. We all have some level of inflammation. One of the experts I spoke to, an immunologist, spoke about the fact that, we are supposed to have some inflammation. When you have a cut and it healed itself, that's because of inflammation. And RFK Jr. said this really weird thing last year, saying,
"Oh, that's a shock." RFK Jr. said something really weird.
At a press conference, I know, in August of last year, saying like, "Oh yeah, I see all these inflamed kids burdened with inflammation at the airport," which is like, why are you staring at kids? First of all. That's a weird thing to do. And also, you can't, most of the time you cannot see inflammation in people. There's a picture of me in there where you can definitely see some inflammation, but most of the time you just cannot.
Yeah, exactly. Because most of it is on the inside, not on the outside. And unless you have something that's red or warm or swollen, you wouldn't necessarily know that. So, you're saying that RFK Jr. has really not been helpful with this issue? Do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, I admittedly was very upset for many regions election night 2024, but I was like, oh my God, this person who really blames people and like puts people at fault for chronic diseases is very likely going to be the health secretary. And that turned out to be true, so.
Yeah, because Donald Trump wanted him to drop out of the race because he couldn't have won, but he could have been a spoiler. And, kind of wish RFK Jr. had stuck to his guns and stayed in the race. But you know what? I wish a lot of things had happened that never happened. RFK Jr. seems to be, with maybe maybe the exception of food color dyes, trying to get rid of those. But he seems to be on the wrong side of nearly every medical issue. You know, I don't get the sense that he's a dumb man. I have come to the conclusion that he is desperate for attention, that he really, I think he's a sociopath. He doesn't care who he hurts. But if giving out medical misinformation is his ticket to the big time, then that's his ticket to the big time. What do you think of his whole Maha movement?
I have so many thoughts. I have to say, while he was a respected environmental lawyer, he was filtering nonsense about vaccines and inflammation and other stuff about vaccines that are just not true. So he's been doing, like, there was a 2005 Rolling Stone article that I was 7 when that came out, so I did not read it at the time and cannot speak about my first impression reading it when it was published. But he just spread so much. He's been spreading, and I shouldn't say misinformation. I should use the term disinformation because it's very intentional. And another thing that he's doing in conjunction with, to go into the California thing a little bit that you were talking about, him and Mehmet Oz, the CMS administrator, they're attacking paid caregiving, and they're specifically seem to be, they're kind of dancing around it through an attack on paid caregiving, but there really is an attack on something called home and community-based services. It's a Medicaid-funded program. So there's different rules in each state. So if you're disabled people on Medicaid and you meet the qualifications on your state, then most of the time you can get a waiting list to then get funding to support uses at home. In California's biggest home and community-based service program, there's no wait list. So when people get on this program, they're able, unless there's a few ones that have a little bit of a waiting list, but the biggest one does not, and there's over 900,000 people on it, then they're able to get funding for someone to come help them at home. Like, there's some states like Texas where the waiting list can be over a decade.
Oh my God.
And so you might be forced into a nursing home where you don't want to be, including children, by the way.
But you know, hasn't it been proven that if you can get somebody in to help somebody so that they can stay in their home, that's much more cost effective?
Yep, much more cost effective. Quality of life tends to be better. And when it comes to this fraud allegation towards California, the only evidence of fraud they're pointing to is growth. They're not even pointing to a few bad apples. Not that I think it's reasonable. They're a reasonable thing to harm people by attacking one state's Medicaid program because there are a few bad apples, like unfortunately we've seen in Minnesota. But in California, there isn't evidence of this.
It's just amazing. And you know, what I thought of, this is very tangential to your reporting about RFK Jr., but I read recently that you should really be aware, especially of like these little reels on Instagram where one or more people tell you about this great thing that either helped them lose weight or help them with some sort of medical issue, that more and more of that is AI. They're not real people. And I thought to myself, you gotta be kidding me. You've gotta be kidding me. It's just seemed like the medical whole area is so open. Do you think this started, I don't know, around COVID? The people who don't know what's true or what's not and don't really have much of a respect for science. And, you know, let's buy some ivermectin and just keep it in the medicine chest just in case we need it. I mean, it's just crazy. When did people stop believing in or following science?
Yeah, it's really scary. I have to say, I wrote an article in 2024 on how Trump caused a hydroxychloroquine shortage for people with lupus and other conditions who actually need it. So there are real ramifications of these conspiracy theories and these theories about drugs and all that causing shortages for people who need them. And the AI stuff is scary. I would say, as a rule of caution, if you don't know anyone, if you don't know the person who's talking, don't know their credentials, and a video is over a minute on TikTok, then it could be monetized. So I would just question that in general, whether or not it's AI, but it could be a way for monetization.
Wow. I want to continue our discussion, Julia, but we need to take a break. I am talking with Julia Metro. She writes for Mother Jones. She covers disability. She covers public health. We are going to get to some more of what she's written about when we come right back after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
Julia Metro reports on disability and public health for Mother Jones. And Julia, I was looking through some of the other things you've written about. You published an article in June about potential Department of Justice changes that might eventually force people into psychiatric institutions. I remember when, I think it was, I don't know, it was a million years ago, it might have been Ronald Reagan who, agreed that, people should have autonomy. They should have the right to make their own decisions if they want treatment or not treatment. They shouldn't be compelled to be in an institution. And the Trump administration is pondering bringing that back. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so an interesting fun fact I'll say is Reagan signed home and community-based services into law that I spoken to about earlier. So Kennedy and they're literally attacking a Reagan-approved thing. So when it comes to this Department of Justice thing, it actually dates back to a Supreme Court decision that's 26 or 27 years old that ruled that disabled people have the right to remain in their communities. Based on the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. In June, I believe, the first reporter to report this memo that the DOJ published that essentially said, Olmstead doesn't actually protect this right. And there's a lot of immediate concerns about this. There's a lot of Olmstead monitoring that's happening. So it's making sure states and communities are giving disabled people the resources they need to remain in their communities and outside of institutions. And so this memo is completely out of line with so many court case decisions, not just the Supreme Court. And essentially the concern is, while it can affect all disabled people who are living outside of institutions, there's a big concern that this will be used to institutionalize people with psychiatric disabilities to live in long-term facilities and essentially not have much recourse to get out. If you may remember last year, there was an executive order from Trump that essentially is like, we need to get homeless people off our streets. So there's a lot of concern that this memo is an extension of that. And as Bloomberg News reported, this memo was apparently, there was a lot of influence by good old Stephen Miller. So, my own reporting didn't confirm that. I trust Bloomberg News. But yeah.
So has this moved forward? Has he written this executive order? Is it coming? Was it just an idea that was being floated? Where does this stand right now? Because, I did read recently, I think it was in the New York Times, Stephen Miller doesn't have the influence that he used to have. He's falling out of favor. I don't know, probably because ICE killed so many people. I'm not sure. But if this was his idea, maybe it'll be stalled. Where does it stand right now?
So the executive order actually regarding homeless people was released last year. The initial concern is that the immediate concern that I spoke to with people about, they're concerned that there will be a lack of enforcement. So for example, there are agreements between states saying you need to give more outpatient mental health treatment. The DOJ may no longer enforce that. So that's the immediate concern. I think a lot of experts are afraid to announce the more serious concerns, but the immediate concern is when DOJ just has an agreement with an area. If they're saying we're not going to really enforce Olmstead anymore based off how we're interpreting it, that's the most immediate concern.
Good grief. Good grief. Is there a good idea that ever came out of Stephen Miller? It just seems like each new thing you hear he's behind is worse than the previous thing that you heard he was behind. It's just, I don't know. I don't know. What about the experts? I mean, are there any experts who say, well, yeah, if this happened, we would have fewer homeless people? I mean, is there anybody who's not in the Trump administration who thinks that this is a good idea?
No, and there's also a big concern about the dehumanization of unhoused people who do have higher rates of disabilities, including psychiatric disabilities like bipolar disorder, for instance. And you'd hope with disability civil rights laws, they would be protected from things like that. And so that's why the undermining of Olmstead, which actually Clarence Thomas ruled against, unsurprisingly, back in the day. He did not think disabled people should have the right to remain in their communities. So no one has really thought, and there's really likely going to be, if more unhoused people are forced into psych wards, there's going to be more cycling just in and out of psych wards because research shows that forced treatment most of the time does not work. It actually leads to mistrust being built between people and institutions supposedly there to help them. So it's really not anything that helps people long term if they're forced into treatment.
Well, if we've looked at this and we have the answers, and I guess some people could be afraid of people with psychiatric illnesses because, there's a fear that there may be some violence there. But, some of the people who are homeless have other issues. Some of them like are gay kids who've been thrown out of their families. I mean, it isn't a homelessness is not a one-size-fits-all problem. It doesn't have a one-size-fits-all answer. And some of the people who are out on the streets are addicts or alcoholics. And, an alcoholic isn't going to accept treatment until they're ready to accept treatment. You can't, you can put an alcoholic in rehab, and maybe I guess if they do something and they end up being in prison for years, maybe then, they would get past their alcoholism. But for the most part, it's got to be generated from within. Maybe this is their solution because they don't want to spend any money on mental health services or support.
I wouldn't say so because inpatient treatment is much more expensive than outpatient treatment, which Olmstead agreements tend to focus around when it comes to treatment of people with psychiatric disabilities.
We still have some time left, so I want to squeeze in one more article that you wrote. New Frontiers of Aging, the fact that people who had illnesses or conditions that not so long ago were fatal are now, with the support of various medicines, living longer. But there need to be further research. There needs to be much more looking into this that doesn't seem to be happening in the Trump administration. Talk about that, what you wrote, and tell the story of Daniel Riley. Takes 19 pills in the morning and 13 at night.
Yeah, so I had gotten this fellowship to report on aging and disability, and I had announced this, and Daniel very kindly sent me an email, and I'm like, oh, you're definitely someone I would like to feature. So he, at around 20 years old, he was born with hemophilia, and he contracted HIV and hepatitis C through a blood infusion before they screened for it. And so he learned in the 80s that he had HIV, which at the time, when you got news like that, that's a death sentence.
Yep.
And so he's been able over the years to get the benefits of treatment But however, and the treatment has definitely improved over the years. And he's also married and has a kid. And he was able to have a kid safely through an invention called like sperm washing. And I talked to his daughter, and she told me this nice anecdote is that his daughter deals with some chronic illness issues too. And she's like, yeah, my dad taught me how to keep a pill tray or whatever the term is, and taught me to be responsible over my medication. And he does deal with chronic health issues because, yeah, but he's alive. And so it's an interesting thing where with a lot of biomedicine, a lot of it is under threat right now, a lot of biomedical research. There's definitely been improvements with a lot of things, but also there needs to be a lot more. Daniel, for instance, deals with kidney disease, and it's questionable whether or not he has that due to the HIV or due to the medicine he took.
Wow.
Yeah, but he's alive and he's doing well. We're connected on Blue Sky. He's on there if people want to find him. But
Wow. And this technique called sperm washing meant that he was able to have a child without passing along the genetic propensity for hemophilia?
For HIV.
Oh, for the HIV.
For the HIV, which is like more of the concern.
Oh.
I can't tell you everything behind how that works, but
I was going to say, man, we're out of time now, but we need to have you back and do a whole discussion on sperm washing, which is something I have never, ever heard of. But it seems like the kind of thing that more people should know about, but we will see. We will see. Julia, thank you so much for being here. I really, really, really appreciate the work you do, and it is so wonderful to talk with you. I hope you will continue to write these wonderful articles and continue to join us to talk about them.
No, thank you so much for having me, and I'd definitely be happy to come back again.
Thank you. We are going to take a break. We are going to be back with more right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I have clearly waited too long to invite Ray Long, a political reporter for the Chicago Tribune, back to our airwaves because I was making a list of all the things I wanted to talk to him about. And it is lengthy, Mr. Long. I hope you're up for it.
It keeps getting longer all the time.
Yeah, really. There's a whole... I don't even know where to start with this. There's a whole controversy over somebody who was accused of bad behavior. Harry Henton. Harry Henton? Is that his first name? Yeah. Benton. And then Chris Welch was called to the principal's office and said, he didn't handle it right, and now he should resign. And I didn't get a chance to send this to you, but I've discovered that there's an opinion piece published by somebody who was in Springfield 8 years ago, and one of the people who came forward to talk about how they were sexually harassed and how it was, in her opinion, really mishandled. You've been to Springfield a lot. I know politicians have a huge ego, and that a lot of times they sort of feel very confident in their appeal to the opposite sex, and whether or not it's warranted, they act on that. That's not unusual. But is this a huge problem in Springfield as far as you know? I mean, is this one of the, because sometimes there'll be something that people talk about kind of under the radar, but it never comes out in the open enough to really publish some stories about it. What's your take on this?
Well, the opinion piece that you mentioned was done by Elena Hampton. And as it happened, I broke a story about her calling out campaign aide who worked for Michael Madigan back in 2018. And that really started the whole Me Too ball going into overdrive in Springfield. That aide of Madigan's was fired for sexually harassing her. She had received all kinds of texts. You know, he was telling her things like, "You look smoking hot in a bikini. Can you go out with me? I'm not a bad dude." You know, all that kind of stuff. He was married with children, and he was also assigning her where she could go campaign. So this was Kevin Quinn. He was an aide to Mike Madigan, and he also happens to be the brother of Marty Quinn, the 13th Ward alderman, the alderman who was handpicked by Mike Madigan. Now we know Madigan's in prison for other things too, but Madigan cut Kevin Quinn loose.
But Elena says that initially she was retaliated against by the Madigan organization.
Right. She filed a lawsuit, a federal lawsuit, saying that she was blackballed from his organization because she reported this sexual harassment. They ended up settling, and about 4 different campaign funds that Madigan controlled contributed to a $275,000 settlement with her back a year or so after the initial stories that we did about it. And so she has credibility on this issue because she stood up as a whistleblower, and she felt that she was not able to advance in the Madigan organization. She left. She didn't want to be hanging around his ward office if this aide Kevin Quinn was going to be there. So then they passed some legislation. They try to put something on the books. And one of the things that they have now is a requirement that you have, basically, if you're a victim of harassment, you can have 3 options. You can go to your supervisor, you can go to the Human Rights Department, and you can go to the Legislative Inspector General. Well, back in 2023, this brings you up to the Harry Benton issue. In 2023, there was a staffer working for him who detailed a whole bunch of inappropriate things he said and things he did that were squarely in a sexual harassment type of situation. That she took that to Welch's office, and nothing really was acted on it. Welch has said that she didn't want it to be acted on because she feared for her job, that she was a young woman who was just starting out in government and politics and didn't want to be labeled as a problem, somebody who complained, which I think a lot of women can relate to. And so, and men too, for that matter. And so she quit because she just couldn't take it anymore. And then Welch's office approached Benton and apparently talked to him. But okay, that's 2023. Then Welch puts $1.4 million into re-electing Benton in 2024. And so
that's the rub.
Yeah. So he supported this, and since there was no actual action taken against Benton that we know of early on, a couple of other women came forward, and it wasn't until earlier this year when a lobbyist complained and filed a complaint, and or complained anyway, and then they start looking into it. It turns out there's a third woman who also had worked for Benton who has had complaints too. The question that has arisen over this is, did Welch do enough? And should he have followed the protocols that you have in place when you're supposed to address sexual harassment immediately? And there are his defense and some of his defenders are saying, well, the person who made the initial complaint didn't want it brought up for fear she could be retaliated against. But there's that line of defense has been questioned, and a lot of women in the caucus, and men too, have complained about how this has not been addressed sufficiently, and that Welch should have done more, and they should have done more to protect the women. Representative Kelly Cassidy, has come out with strong statements, and there has been a women's caucus chair. Her name is Mary Beth Canty. She's from the Arlington Heights area, and she released a statement that said she's still concerned about the culture of harassment in Springfield. Now, to go back to one of your initial questions, Joan, is there a culture of harassment? Is there sexual harassment? When I first got down there in the 80s, when I covered it, it was clearly high level of frat type culture. It has died down to a large extent from those days, but it hasn't died down enough, apparently, since just 8 years ago when Lena Hampton raised these issues, and they were supposed to address it. And now this is one of the first big tests here, and Welch is now in the crossfire.
Well, as I recall, when Chris Welch was named to be Speaker, there were some accusations against him that didn't seem to go anywhere. But it wasn't, as I recall, it wasn't just one person who, accused Welch of bad behavior. He got accused of bad behavior of many kinds. I don't know.
Yeah,
I wonder.
In fact, I broke that story too, right before.
Yeah,
he
talk
was
about that.
chosen.
I remember sort of what went on back then, but refresh my memory.
It was a time when Madigan was not getting enough votes to retain the speakership again. He was under fire both because of this question of sexual harassment not being addressed well enough, but also because the feds were coming down and had already indicted his longtime confidant, Mike McLean, in what became the ComEd 4 case, which so Madigan had this kind of dual pressure on him, and he couldn't get the votes, and they were running out of time to try to have a speaker in place when a new legislative session started in mid-January of 2021. Well, right before, when it looked like Welch was becoming a candidate who was starting to sew up some of the votes, I was scrambling to pull together a story about his background, which included a police report. No charges were filed, but a police report that a girlfriend of his complained that he had slammed her head against a kitchen counter when she called him a loser. And she had called the police, and that's how the report got done. And then at the time, there was also a relative of Welch's who talked to the girlfriend and urged her not to file formal charges. Now, this came up, and there was a big huddle at the downstate by many women in the House Democratic Caucus wanting to know, what gives with this. But eventually, Welch talked it out, and he had support in that huddle, and he emerged as the candidate. Kelly Cassidy at the time was the only one who did not vote for him. He got everyone voted for him, including Madigan, except for Kelly Cassidy, who voted present. She has since voted for him in the follow-up to the speaker, but now she's got more concerns because of the way this was handled. So, yes, it was a very concerning development, but they were able to work through it. I talked to some of the women who supported him at that time after the story broke about the police report, and they felt that we knew him and we've seen him as a legislator, and they trusted him. And then there were some who felt that black men also get too many false allegations lodged against them. And so those were some of the issues that mitigated their concerns. And so he has arisen, obviously. He became speaker and he was reelected as speaker. But this same type of issue, which contributed to the toppling of Madigan. Madigan was not indicted himself at that time, but the feds were clearly had him in their sights. But it was a matter where the folks who were in the Democratic caucus thought they had heard enough information to mollify them enough to vote for Welch as speaker.
Ray, I have more questions about this. We need to take a break. I'm talking to longtime political reporter for the Chicago Tribune, Ray Long. We will be right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm talking with Ray Long. We are kind of talking about the whole Springfield Me Too thing, most recently with Harry Benton. Now that it has sort of resurfaced previous criticism of Chris Welch. There's an op-ed in the Tribune from somebody who was harassed by a Madigan aide and was, she says, retaliated against. Do you think that part of the reason why Chris Welch didn't want to make a big deal about the Harry Benton case, aside from the fact that the woman who first reported it said, you know what, I don't want to go public with this, that'll only hurt me. But clearly Welch knew about it, and yet he supported Harry Benton. Do you think it's because of what he himself had to go through with accusations of very improper behavior?
Really, I can't make a conclusion on that. I can't tell, but just the idea that you're raising that question is one of the issues that has come up in discussions here too, and about Welch. Now, obviously, his staff has put out multiple statements saying he followed the wishes of the person who brought the complaint. Now,
yeah, but
there's some
still
question whether
he personally knew. And it seems weird to me, like, okay, fine, you're not going to call for this guy to resign because the victim doesn't want to come forward. But if you know this is out there, you're going to still put that much money in his reelection campaign? Is that the incumbent at all costs attitude?
Well, that's what the Republicans are saying. Tony McCombie, who is the House Republican leader, said, he's already got a 78 to 40 majority in the House, and he still had to throw that much money into saving one seat. So he could go to prevent himself from going to 77 majority to 41. The questions here are still coming out, and I think Welch is going to have to to answer some more tough questions. He's apparently been out. Well, there's been reporting in the Tribune that he's been out talking to a lot of different small groups of lawmakers who have raised all these questions. And there have been, we just saw recently on WGN, 3 female lawmakers, House Democrats, who came on and defended him. But the issue still is whether he did enough, specifically since you have a rule to act. One of the protocols is once you're supposed to act, and they didn't act until after the staffer had left her job, and then they talked to Benton. Now, Welch, when he first got an inspector general report, removed Benton from committees and from caucus meetings, but actually the sequence there is not quite right, but he eventually did kick Benton from his caucus and from his positions on committees. But then when the full report came to him, Welch said that he wanted Benton to resign, and Benton did resign a couple of days after that. But there's been a firestorm here centered on both what's going on in Springfield. Didn't we take care of this 8 years ago? This is supposed to be a better deal, but it goes back, Joan, to kind of this whole idea, and we've talked about it before, that when they do reforms in Springfield, they just seem to be incapable of writing a law without some loopholes or some wiggle room that benefit lawmakers. And so
well, it's very hard. It's very hard, I guess, to pass laws or ethics ordinances that may one day bite you in the rear. I mean, the Supreme Court got so much grief. They have no code of ethics. They're the only judicial body that has no code of ethics, and we should write one up and we should pass it by Congress. We should enact one. And so the Supreme Court, in something of, I think, a panic, put together their own ethics standards, which are so watered down. They are so full of loopholes. It's like looking at a piece of lace. So yes, they checked the box, but they didn't actually write up anything that could come back to haunt them. Is that too big an ask to say, like Ray Long, you have to come up with a code of ethics that all the reporters that you work with must follow? I don't know.
Well, we do. I mean, we
do, don't we? So why is it so different, for everybody else? I mean, we do come up with codes of ethics. I remember when I was working in television, I was told, that there's community standards and you can't violate community standards. And I was also told that impropriety was bad, but even the appearance of impropriety could be cause to make me lose my job. Now that's a pretty decent standard.
Right. And there's a Society of Professional Journalists has a whole list of bullet points that you're supposed to follow, and people do, and they consider that, the right thing. You're supposed to handle things honestly, do things forthrightly, not be sneaky about how you interview people and things like that. I mean, you just are supposed to be straight up, and that's how you and I have handled this over our careers. But when it comes to public officials, they are certainly in Illinois are incapable. And as you noted with the U.S. Supreme Court, they're incapable of having high ethical standards in place. And that, I think, is a problem that just comes back to bite him all the time. This is the most recent example of that. You can have a cultural change, but you also have to have some guidelines in place that are not just guidelines, but hard and fast rules. And they have ways that they're arguing that the Benton case didn't completely fall within the rules that Welch followed, but it's hard for him to make that argument because there are rules in place. And also that legislative inspector general report not only noted the lobbyist that I talked about, but it noted another Benton staffer who had felt uncomfortable with his types of antics. And so the legislative inspector general also could only look at a year. It had basically a statute of limitations on what he could look at, so he couldn't even investigate. By the time this most recent case that he looked into, the one with the lobbyist earlier this year, by the time that came up, the first staffer's complaint had already expired during that statute of limitations. Now, did he reference it? Yes, the legislative inspector general, Mike McCuskey, referenced it as part of a pattern and practice of Benton. And so they had that from 23, they had the one from the lobbyist, and then they had another legislative staffer who complained and talked to the legislative inspector general about this. But, there's too many hoops here that give too many loopholes for lawmakers to jump through.
Mm-hmm. We need to take a break for news, Ray, but I don't know if I sent you this link. I have no memory, Ray. Time. I have no sense of time. I have no sense of what came before. WGN, a few weeks ago, published an article on their website about this whole situation with Speaker Welch and Mr. Benton. And as part of their reporting, Governor Pritzker weighed in and kind of not really standing behind Speaker Welch. I want to talk to you about that. And eventually I want to talk to you about a horseshoe sandwich, but we'll get to that later. Ray Long is here. We're going to be back after the news.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm chatting with Ray Long, longtime political reporter for the Chicago Tribune. We are talking about a controversy in Springfield that stretched to touch a lot of different people. And Ray, when would you say that Springfield really started embracing the Me Too movement? Or have they even yet?
Well, it definitely broke onto the scene back in late 2017. And then Elena Hampton, who wrote this op-ed in the Tribune today, when I broke her story about the alleged harassment that she underwent with one of Mike Madigan's aides, that was where it started to hit a fever pitch. Then also that same year in 2018, at the end of the legislative session, a person who was an advocate for legalizing marijuana complained that then Representative Lou Lang had harassed her. And Lang stepped down from his leadership role and asked for a legislative investigation, legislative inspector general investigation. And the IG basically said that she couldn't come up with an official founded report She said that she needed to also talk to the complainant, the marijuana advocate, and that person would not cooperate. The IG did say she talked to a lot of other people who did not support the advocate's position, but that was where that was. Then a week after that, you'll remember this, Joan, a week after that, after the legislature let out in the spring of 2018, a woman who was a clerk who worked under a chief of staff, Tim Mapes, held a press conference up here in Chicago, drove up from Springfield, held a press conference up here in Chicago and said, you know, he has sexually harassed her and created a terrible work environment. And Madigan, by then, you know, trying to keep his own job intact, tossed Mapes out the door immediately. Now, Mapes later, you'll recall his name, Joan, because he was found guilty of being in a perjury-related case where he was caught lying to the grand jury about what he knew in the Madigan investigation that ultimately ended up with Madigan being indicted, going to trial, and now he's in prison. So it has, in theory, it really hit a high point in 2018. They've passed some legislation to try to address this, but it's not everything that all advocates thought it should be. And I did want to make a point here, Joan, too. You know, we're talking about this staffer who had complained about Benton back in 2023, and Welch's office said they didn't immediately pursue things because she did not want to become a political pariah and jeopardize her chances of being hired for other government jobs. Now, the story, which has been done, several stories done by my former colleagues, Rick Pearson and Jeremy Gorner in the Tribune, makes very clear that this staffer said she expected Welch's office to handle her complaints in-house. And she took one of the options, one of the three options that we talked about earlier, that you have to register a complaint. She went to her supervisor. She could have gone to the IG. She could have gone to the Department of Human Rights, but it is now a question of whether, you know, Welch's line of defense is going to withstand the pushback from the original person who complained about Benton. Now, regardless, Kelly Cassidy has complained that it doesn't really matter what we, you know, whose wishes were followed or when they were turned over or what happened. As she said in the story by Pearson and Gorner, we can debate whether or not her wishes should have been respected, but the argument the speaker has been making, which is that he took no action for nearly 3 years out of respect for her wishes, does not hold up to scrutiny. And this original staffer said that she brought it to Welch because she wanted to make sure no woman would have to deal with harassment from Benton again.
Well, I have to say, but that's what she said makes a lot of sense because, you know, maybe she didn't want it to be like a huge public scandal, but she wouldn't have said anything to a person in power unless she thought that person was going to help her out. I mean, if she really wanted nothing to happen, she didn't have to say anything to anybody. I mean, it kind of really gives her that argument that she expected him to deal with that. Gives it a lot of credibility. And were you surprised? Like right before we went to the news, I told you that WGN was reporting that Governor Pritzker has put pressure on Welch. They reported that he said, The Speaker has a responsibility to be utterly and completely transparent about the situation, to make sure that he is letting the public know, as well as, in particular, his members know exactly what happened, and to the extent that he made mistakes, to own up to those mistakes. I've urged the Speaker publicly to make sure that all of the information is out there and that he lets people know not only the things that were on paper that were written or done back then, but also what he was thinking in that process. Would you have expected Pritzker to be quiet or maybe even supported Welch?
I think that on this issue, you have to take a stand. And you also have to recall that he once called on a state senator, Mike Hastings, who had been accused in a divorce issue of some alleged abuse. Pritzker had called on him, and at the time indicted Senator Emil Jones III to resign. So Pritzker has staked out some ground here as a women's advocate on this. But the question, I think, is, how much further he can go. You can point and say, it's up to Welch to be transparent. Will you use your bully pulpit, Mr. Governor, to try to make things better through tougher laws on the books and through more clarity? Clearly, he wants Welch to be more transparent, or as transparent as possible, and I think that's true of everybody in the House Democratic Caucus. But he's under fire right now, and he's on the defense.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised. I mean, Benton, if he wants to be pressured out, I think people would agree with that. But I was surprised that people are saying that because Welch didn't deal with this in a more aggressive manner, that he also needs to resign. Do you think that idea has momentum? Do you think he will resign?
Well, I think there's pressure on that. I don't know how much traction it's got, but there are certainly more and more people. Elena Hampton, in the op-ed today, had called for his resignation. Fred Crespo, who had been at odds with the Speaker before, called for his resignation. I think another factor here that could play into the attitude between Pritzker and Welch is that Welch just came out after he was under fire for this. He came out to support another $150 million for Chicago schools, which is something that one of his backers, the Chicago Teachers Union, would want. But it comes at a time when there's not much money in the couch cushions to be squeezing another 150 out for Chicago. And who could believe a package for only Chicago could pass the legislature when you have literally hundreds of other school districts around the state who think they need more money too?
This is a problem that is always going to exist. And once in a great while, you do hear of a woman charged with harassment. I think there was a case at J.P. Morgan where one of the guys there accused a woman boss of harassment, but usually it's the other way around. And,
right.
There is, I think, one thing that's true with Democrats. I mean, people are talking about that not only should Harry Benton get out of the politics, but that Chris Welch should resign. I mean, Graham Plattner, when the final charges came out, he was pushed out of the race. and contrast that with our Republican friends who have said almost nothing about Max Miller, the congressman accused of physical abuse, accused of physically abusing his wife, his very young daughter, and his girlfriend accuses him of the same thing. And he's like, I'm not going to resign. His father-in-law, oh God, I just blanked on his name. Oh, Bertie Moreno. Yeah, came out and said, this guy really needs psychological help. And yet he's like, I'm still running for office, and I demand an investigation, that the investigation be held because, I will be exonerated. And there aren't too many days left for him to get out of the race and for the party to get somebody else in the race. Republicans don't seem to be as worried about these kinds of issues as Democrats do. Do you think that's a fair observation?
Well, I think Democrats are reacting quicker and with more definitive requests for stepping down, for example. The President of the United States just yesterday said he thought that Miller was a good man, and he didn't back off of his support for Miller for re-election. So you have to really examine these kinds of two different reactions from the two different parties. Does it happen all the time with every one every time there's a complaint that comes up on one party or another? Do they react uniformly one way or another? I don't know. We could say that, but we certainly have seen these high-profile cases splitting in two different directions.
Ray, we need to take another break. And when Ray Long and I come back, we are going to discuss something called a horseshoe sandwich, And I'd never heard of this all my years in Illinois, but apparently it is something known only to the people of Springfield, Illinois. Ray Long will explain what it is when we come right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm talking to longtime Chicago Tribune political reporter Ray Long, and Ray sent me a link to an article about the cheesy horseshoe sandwich, Springfield's pride and joy. I have lived in Illinois for virtually my entire adult life, not that far from Springfield. And I have never heard, my friend, of a horseshoe sandwich. And when I read the article, I really didn't know what to think about it. So first of all, do you have first-hand experience? Have you eaten the horseshoe sandwich?
Yes. It's, I lived in Springfield for 20 plus years, Joan. So, I've had it. Now, the typical one, this article that you and I have read here ran in the Christian Science Monitor where they were talking about it, but they missed a few points. So let me fill you in.
Please do. Well, this is something that we all need to know about.
The horseshoe is typically standard. The standard dish is a couple of pieces of Texas toast with some hamburger thrown on an open face, covered with fries, and then melted cheese, a plentiful melted cheese. And that is something that is a cholesterol city for sure. But that has really caught on as a signature sandwich there. And it dates back almost 100 years. The story goes that in the late 1920s, a hotel in Springfield called the Leland Hotel, which no longer exists, was looking for something different, and they put this concoction together, and it caught on. Now it's in almost every restaurant in Springfield if you go there and ask for a horseshoe, or if you want to go with a smaller diet and get a pony shoe, you can order these up. Now, Joan, I've had not just hamburger. I've had chicken. I've had shrimp horseshoe. I've had many other kinds. You just name a type of meat, and I would imagine I've tried them all over the years, though I have decided that's probably not the best thing for my heart, and I cut back on those a long time ago.
One of my questions, the traditional one with the burger, there are 2 pieces of Texas toast, which for those of you who don't know is that big fat toast. It's like an inch thick. There are 2 pieces of Texas toast, and it's an open face sandwich. So are there 2 hamburgers, one on each piece of bread?
Well, it depends on how big you want to go. Yeah, there can be 2 hamburgers on that. There can be one big fat hamburger that covers it up, and you got to have lots of cheese. Now, there was a factoid in this story that I did not realize, and it was talking about one place in Springfield called Darcy's Pint, which is constantly rated one of the best in town, if not the best places to get it. And it says on a typical day, they sell 700 to 1,000 of these sandwiches. And not only that,
No. One day, not like a year.
Yeah. It says a day. We sell between 700 and 1,000 a day, and it says they make 90 to 100 gallons of cheese sauce every day, and they use 240 pounds of black cheese and 750 pounds of French fries. Wow.
You know, when I first was looking at what made it up, it was like, Texas toast, hamburger, French fries. And I thought, well, hamburger and French fries, I mean, you get that anywhere.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize is that it's in a pile. It is in a plate, and it is in a pile. And the cheese sauce goes over the glorious pile, I assume, soaking into everything.
Yeah. A lot of competition over what cheese you should use and all that. It's part of the big discussion in Springfield too, and some people have even sworn that melted cheese whiz is the secret too. So
oh my God,
there's all kinds of possibilities here.
What's your favorite cheese?
What's that?
What's your favorite cheese?
I'm flexible. I don't have a favorite, so I don't want to lean one way or another, but I would say Tillamook sharp cheddar would work pretty well. But I don't want to denigrate any of those melted cheese whiz fans either. So one of the things that also struck me in this story was, Springfield is a place that draws people from all over the world to see the Abraham Lincoln sites there, and they're worth seeing. I mean, you've got his home, the old state capitol, the tomb, his law office, and the museum, which is fantastic. But one of the people there who was a promoter of Springfield said, there's more to Illinois and Springfield than Abraham Lincoln. The horseshoe is really our thing. And I'm thinking, wait. Does that say something about America right now? That some folks are thinking the horseshoe is bigger than Abraham Lincoln?
Well, I thought it was really interesting in that article, and we are really out of time, but I have to add this, that you can tell if somebody, because it's very, very geographically specific. And if anybody ever talks about it, like on the West Coast or the East Coast or the North or the South, they've spent time in Springfield. You've spent time in Springfield, because you wouldn't know about the horseshoe sandwich unless you had spent time there. Well, now I have another reason to get back down to Springfield. I don't know how I missed it, but I promise you I will not miss it a second time.
Investigative reporting, Joan.
There you go. Ray, thank you so much for talking about all this stuff that's going on. You really helped make sense of it for us.
Thank you, Joan. Good to be here, as always.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
It's been a while since we spoke with Pete Dominick, but we have invited him back today. You can see his website, standupwithpete.com. He wants you to stand for something. He is a stand-up comic, news commentator, a host, maybe a horse too, I don't know, host, yes, journo activist, yes, moderator, and more. Pete, I withdraw the horse thing. I don't know where that came from, probably because I was just talking about horseshoe sandwiches.
It's good to be back, Joan. Thank you very much.
It's great to have you back. You keep an eye on everything that is going on politically right now, and we have a cornucopia of things that we could talk about. We could talk about Todd Blanche. We could talk about Iran. We could talk about Max Miller. We could talk about lots of different things. What is really drawing your attention these last few days?
Well, all of those issues are ones that I've been paying attention to for a while. They matter. They're very impactful. But I've been paying a lot of attention to the progressive movement as well. It's really interesting to see what's happening with the Democratic Party, with the rise of the DSA, with the kind of different alliances that are being formed, the litmus tests that are unfortunately, I think, in effect in too many places, but the outcomes of the elections. And I think what's most interesting is when actual rubber meets the road, if anything gets done. And what we've seen in New York is really exciting with Mayor Mamdani. It's not
He really has put his money where his mouth is so far, and he hasn't done it in a way that's going to raise taxes. I mean, he's come through for some of his promises and found a way to make them financially make sense. I don't know what you'd have to complain about there. Do you share the belief that is, I don't know how true it is, but it's being written about a lot, that Democrats better be careful. They better be careful. You know, like if you elect people who say they're Democratic Socialists, you're going to lose in the general election because they're just too radical.
I think that could be the case in some states. I think it very well could be the case in some states. I do worry about that because winning is the most important thing, and you want to try to probably nominate the most electable candidate. But at the same time, we've seen it all now, Joan. I mean, we have seen it all. And I'm one that's kind of ready to throw caution to the wind. I was really inspired by Kamala Harris when she stepped up and ran. And I've been really inspired by some of these young progressive candidates that have stepped up and run as well, especially the younger women and people of color, which I think are the base of the party now, or could be. But I think that people like El Said in Michigan are generational talent. I mean, this guy is so good. I think Pete Buttigieg is so talented. I have obviously Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We already talked about Mamdani and so many others that I think are really exciting. And what we need to have a conversation about, obviously, is the role of government in our lives. That's what politics is. That's what these conversations are about. And it would be amazing if this generation of political leaders, of those that we've elected to, do what's in the public's interest, actually use government for good and change our lives for the better and make things more affordable, create more opportunity, more security, and all the things that government is supposed to do. That's the fight. And they've got an opportunity to actually put their plans in action. And I'm really excited about that.
You said something that I've been talking about. Is a Democratic Socialist candidate the right candidate everywhere? Absolutely not. The candidate needs to reflect the voters. If it's a truly conservative district, maybe a conservative Democrat is the best way to win an elected office. And I think the idea that somehow because a few Democratic Socialists have been elected, clearly because that's what the voters wanted, there's somehow a fear that every race in every state is now going to be, the Democratic Party is going to be fronted by somebody who's just too radical for the voting public. And I think that's nonsense. And one thing that bothers me is, many years ago when it seemed like there were only conservative Democrats and middle of the road Democrats, I was always told when I would complain about a conservative Democrat and how they, like they were, pro-life or something. And I was always told, it's up to the voters and we are a big tent. So we're a big tent. But now that the shoe's on the other foot and we still have the middle of the road Dems, and like you said, people who are sick and tired of stern letters and white papers and want somebody who's actually going to do things. Now it seems like I'm not being told vote blue no matter who. Now it's like, oh, we have to get these people out or we have to minimize their influence. Wait a minute. What happened to the big tent, Pete?
Yeah, no, I think those are all really good points. And you and I have been paying attention and covering these issues for a long time. And so I think that we've got a fairly good perspective on it. But, I also hate labels, Joan. I hate all of the labels. I hate the Overton window, which is the measure of where you are in the political spectrum. Are you far left? Are you far right? I certainly think that the socialist label isn't very helpful. But when you talk about and listen to these candidates who are running and the platforms and policies that they're proposing, it doesn't seem radical at all to me. It doesn't seem radical one bit if you compare it to an FDR Democrat. Certainly doesn't seem radical to compare it to how Canadians or Norwegians or Israelis or Japanese or Australians have their social safety net, how they are able to afford college. My daughter's going to college in Amsterdam. She's about to leave. I'm devastated personally for me and my interest. But, you give them roots, you give them wings. She's going to the University of Amsterdam because she's an EU citizen. My ex-wife is an Italian citizen, EU citizen. It's so much cheaper to go to college in Europe, especially if you have citizenship there. Is it better? Is it as good? Hell yes, it is. It's preposterous, the cost of college, the cost of healthcare, the issues of wage disparity, and so many other issues. And when we talk about these policies, specifically healthcare, overwhelmingly Americans agree with what some people refer to as radical, because it might be a more progressive Democrat that's standing up for it. Overwhelmingly, Americans agree it's not radical at all to the rest of the world. It is what brings them health and happiness, if you ask me.
Absolutely. 2 points that you've made, I think that are perfect. The fact that labels and words, descriptions, progressive, liberal, socialist, they mean different things to different people. And looking up the Wikipedia definition of a democratic socialist and get this long list of ideas doesn't help you. You need to go to the person who's running and say, hey, what do you think about this? What is it that you think you want to accomplish? What are your ideas? And, the one thing that I think people misunderstand about socialism, it's not a rejection of capitalism. It just believes government should help people. And, didn't that used to be what we thought about government? I don't know.
Yes,
I'm older than you, but when I was little, it seemed like that was the idea.
Well, that's why I said FDR Democrats, the New Deal and all of the policies that were brought in, Social Security, Medicare. It's interesting. Medicare, a health policy expert friend of mine, Dr. Aaron Carroll, is one of the smartest guys in the world, in my opinion, one of the best healthcare experts in the country. Whenever he would talk about Medicare, he'd always joke about how people are supportive of Medicare for everybody 65 and older. For everybody 65 and older, America is as American as apple pie. But if you wanted to give Medicare to people under 65, that's socialism. Medicare for all is a single payer system, and we are pretty close to achieving that. I think it's probably the most popular issue that these progressive Democrats are running on. And the other people, everybody else doesn't have any solutions. I mean, I've covered healthcare reform and health policy for years, and I firmly believe that Medicare for all is something that we absolutely deserve. And then people ask, can we afford it? Hell yeah, we can afford it.
Oh, you mean like $1 billion? What if it costs $1 billion a day? Oh, wait, no, we only spend that on wars. I'm sorry. Never mind, Pete.
There's so much that needs to be done to the healthcare industry to regulate it in ways that Obamacare never could, from the pharmaceutical industry to the health insurance industry to all of the rest, the hospitals. And that needs to be done. That you need to bring down the cost of care. And this is a conversation we have to have because it's unaffordable and it's not radical at all. It's not radical at all to the rest of the world. The rest of the world, if you travel, if you know anybody that lives in any other country in the world, any civilized, industrialized country, they think we are absolutely crazy that this is the healthcare paradigm that we live in, that a huge percentage of Americans, the leading cause of personal bankruptcy is because you couldn't afford your healthcare bills for you or someone that you love, by the way. And the worst nightmare kind of happened to me when it comes to healthcare coverage. I lost my corporate job and I lost my health insurance with it. My wife didn't have health insurance. So what were we supposed to do? Thank God for Obamacare. There were subsidies on the open market, but it's not great care. It's not a great policy. The bottom line is you should not have to be stuck with a job you don't like just because of the health insurance. And that is only in America when it comes to civilized countries. Yep. The rest of the world is laughing at us and pitying us for our ridiculously broken healthcare system that serves very few.
There was a story that brought this to life recently in the news where a group of guys were hiking and one of them fell and his walking stick went through his body. And you could see the picture. It goes in one side, comes out the other.
I saw this story.
He got a lot of attention because he walked like 6 hours to get down to a place where he could get help because he knew his bill would be $6,000 to $10,000 if he had a helicopter come rescue him off of the trail. $6,000 to $10,000, and he didn't want to spend it, so he walked down with this stick through his body.
A couple of things to learn from that incident. First of all, you said he was with a group of guys. He was alone. So
no, there were two other guys because one walked in front of him and one walked behind him. And the one in front, and whenever they would come upon other groups, especially groups with children, he would warn them. The guy in front would warn them, my friends had an accident. It looks pretty bad. You might want to close your kid's eyes. And the other friend walked behind him just in case he collapsed.
Jesus, this story just got so much more interesting. The point you're making is that he couldn't afford to be medevac. Yes. But that's an extreme example. I mean, a lot of people don't call an ambulance when they need to call an ambulance because of, and by the way, if you know anybody who works on ambulances, they compete to get to the patient. Like they try to beat each other. The whole system is so embarrassingly broken. And the point, though, is getting back to Democrats, it's not extreme. What the DSA and what left-wing progressive Democrats want and have wanted for generations is a public option, is Medicare for all, is a more affordable healthcare system that is also more accessible and better quality for everybody. That is not radical. That is a mainstream, middle-of-the-road issue. And I would argue many of these other DSA ideas are as well, mainstream, middle-of-the-road issues. They're not radical. They're certainly not radical to the rest of the world. They're just new to Americans, or their old ideas come again. Like I said, FDR had some pretty progressive ideas that were considered radical at the time. And now they're policies that Americans would vote you out of office if you ever decided to do away with it.
Yeah. I'm speaking to Pete Dominick. You may have watched his podcast. He also does a lot of writing. It is called Stand for Something, Be the Change You Want in the World, standupwithpete.com. We are going to take a break and be right back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm speaking with Pete Dominick. Pete, do you do your live interviews on Substack?
Yeah, I do them on Substack and YouTube. It depends on who the guest is. If they're on Substack, I'll do it there. Otherwise, YouTube. But I'm on both at Stand Up with Pete. So find me there. So
if you're on Substack, you can only talk to other people who are on Substack?
They have to have an account. They don't have to be posting or have a brand or anything. They just have to have a Substack account. So as a reader or a subscriber to other people's, you just have to have the app or have an account so I can invite you to join me on that app.
Who was your most interesting guest recently?
Oh man, I love Celeste Headley. Do you know Celeste? She's a former public radio person herself and NPR personality, author, and now professor. One of the smartest women I know. I just talked to her for today's show. And Glenn Kirshner is a former federal prosecutor. I just talked with him as well. Those are just two of my most recent guests. But, I've been talking to people every day for weeks, for years, for over 15 years. I try to find the smartest people I can to explain what is going on these days, because every day is so filled. It's such an emotional roller coaster if you're paying attention to the news, and how do you not?
Yeah.
That we need to make sense of it, and we need to also increasingly understand what is reality with the increase of AI and dishonesty and people doing and saying things just to get clicks. You get misled all the time. It's just embarrassing, humiliating, and most importantly, it's not in the public's interest. And so we try to meet every day and talk about these issues and try to still hold on to reality. How are you keeping your grasp on reality in these times, Joan?
Well, I always say to my audience that especially on Fridays, they have to find something that brings them peace or brings them joy, whether that's just, reading a book or going to a movie or going out to dinner, whatever it is, because you have to remember why you're in this fight and what it is you're fighting for. And I think if you have your nose to the grindstone too much, you forget about that. You forget about why it is you're doing all this and making these sacrifices. And that's always my advice to people is, you have to balance it. You want to do what you can do. And if you're shut in, you can get your computer out and you can send some emails to your representatives. If you can make phone calls, you can do a lot of different things. Hey, you can join me and talk on the radio. A lot of people do that.
I want to ask you something, follow up on something you just said. You said it's important to take breaks and find joy and remind yourself of why you're in the fight, why you're trying to make a difference in the world. Recently, I was talking to someone I didn't know very well, and I was telling this person who's a physician about what I do for a living. And, I was describing myself as an advocate, an activist, a journalist, a comedian. But I mostly now identify as an advocate, trying to make the world a better place, trying to be the change I want to see in the world. But I wanted to ask you and anybody asking themselves, why do you care? Why do you do the work to, in this case that we're in now, preserve whatever we have left of democracy? Why do you do things, take action to make the world a little better place for people who might not be you? A lot of the policies that I've advocated for over the years don't necessarily benefit me directly. They might benefit my family or my kids. But so many of the policies that I care deeply about are things like climate or reproductive rights or LGBT equality. Why do I care about those issues in particular? And I have really solid answers for those questions, but I wonder what people think when, I told this woman what I was doing for a living. She goes, "That's not real. It's not real work."
Hello?
And I thought, well, it's if someone's wealthy, they have less to be concerned with, I suppose, about issues that affect most people. And this person was very wealthy, but I didn't, get into it. I just thought it was interesting because it describes a strain of Americans who are apathetic for any number of reasons or cynical. They don't think that we can make a difference. So why is it that you've been doing this radio show and the work that you've been doing for so long, Joan? For you, what is the purpose that you rest on?
Well, I had a vision for what the show was going to be like after Kamala Harris won. And I can tell you, Pete, it was going to be a lot more arts and culture and, things that inspire us. But when Donald Trump won again, I was determined that I was either going to do my best to keep this country from coming apart, or I was going to do my best to get behind the people who can put it back together. And this isn't very zen, but I won't let these bastards win.
Yeah, I really resonates with me the way you just said it. And it's to some extent it's personal because certain things that happened to me, my family was targeted and local Board of Education fights. And so, yeah, I'm angry and I hold a grudge about those personal things. But I agree. Like, I don't want to let these bastards win because of what it means when they do.
Yeah.
Because it means in particular marginalized communities, people who are living on the edges and in the shadows will suffer that much more. And I can't abide by that.
No.
I can't abide by that. I can't and never have been able to let my daughters see me do nothing. And I've also known as a parent that they're going to be watching what I do, not what I say. I mean, don't get me wrong, Joan. I'm always running my mouth about what I believe, but it's more about what I do. When I got my electric car, when I got my solar panels, that was action. That was them seeing me be more sustainable, composting, cutting down on our meat, any number of things for, say, the environment. And so it's an important thing to do as a parent as well. And letting fascists, authoritarians, white supremacists, and Christian nationalists, who are a small percentage of Americans, dominate the rest of us is not something that we are going to allow happen. It's not something we are going to stand for. And that's certainly what gets me out of the bed every morning.
Yeah.
And I pop right up, Joan. I pop right out of bed because I got purpose.
And I don't know if you feel this way, but I also feel a little bit of guilt because I feel like it all went to hell on my watch. How did the older generation of this country, where did we stop paying attention? Did we, what did we do? I feel like I'm a little bit responsible for the way things are, which means I have to redouble my efforts to get us back on track.
It's interesting, that perspective in terms of what you could have done differently, what we could have done differently, what our generation did or didn't do, what we're responsible for or not. I mean, I just think it's the right thing to do. I'm kind of a Stoic philosophy fan, and there's a certain righteousness, justice that I have to live by and have to try to make sure that other people see modeling this behavior, especially as a man, a white man, someone who historically in this country obviously has had all the power and the opportunity. Like, it's really important that guys like me do our best to advocate for people who aren't like us, and breaking that cycle and that network is something that I've been doing my whole life and pride myself on. And so we all can do something. I don't think there's a lot of sense in feeling guilt or living in the past. I just question what I can do today and how I can be better. And that's the question that I ask every day. And, I think a lot about history and civil rights and human rights leaders of the past, from Dr. King to Harvey Milk to so many others, that fought for black rights, gay rights, and obviously the suffrage movement for women to vote. I think a lot about those people. And I think a lot about, I'm a romantic, I guess, but like growing up, I was like, who would I have been? Who would I have been during those times? And now we know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're living in those times where rights are being taken from the LGBT community, obviously from black folks, voting rights, and from women. We're watching it happen. So now you get to answer that question. Who do you want to be? Yep. And if it's not affecting you or your family directly, I promise you it will. As Pema Chodron writes in her seminal book, When Things Fall Apart, I promise you, things will fall apart. And you're going to want to be on the right side of them. Whether you get to put them back together, I think I'd want to be on that team.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Pete, do you still do stand-up? Do you have any stand-up appearances scheduled that we could talk about?
Not at the moment. I'm semi-retired in a weird kind of way. I mean, I don't know how interesting this is for you or your listeners to talk about, but like my career as a comedian, basically I did everything you could do as a comic. I headlined clubs and colleges all over the country, all the festivals, TV shows. I worked for Stephen Colbert and Jon Stewart and John Oliver. I did it all, and I loved it. But you can age out of it. And the pandemic and politics kind of ruined comedy for me. And then I got just so much more into speaking engagements and using my comedy and my skills in keynote addresses, as well as doing my radio show and now my daily podcast, that, and I didn't want to be on the road because it's very hard to be a good comedian and a good father because you got to work every weekend. And the weekends is where parenting exists. And so, but I never stopped doing stand up until fairly recently when part of it is like there's so many good young people. There's so many good young people of color, women, gay people, wild cards as we call them because they're intersection. They're gay, they're a person of color, they're a little person. Like there's so much less of a barrier of entry for comedy, and there's so many more people that are way funnier than stand-up comedians. They're just doing funny things on Instagram and TikTok. So I'm excited to see like this generation of comedians come up, and I'm sitting back and mostly watching. I may get back into it a lot more, but I'm mostly doing speaking gigs in my podcast.
Pete Dominic, you can find him on Substack. You can find him on YouTube. Pete, thank you so much for being here today.
Joan, it's always a pleasure to be talking with the legend. I appreciate you.
Yeah, in my own mind. Thank you very much, Pete. That is going to do it for me today. Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez is up next. She's got some really interesting guests. Co-founder of Justice Democrats, Corbin Trent, is going to be joining her, and a couple of the really good guests. I will be back here tomorrow at 2 p.m. Please join me. One of the people I'm going to be talking to tomorrow is Ben Wickler. He has a new book out, and Joyce Vance is going to be back. We will do all that and more. Have a great evening, my friends. Paul Shavar, you can take the day off tomorrow. I give you that.
Thank you.
Have a great evening and good night.